Right now, the most interesting thing in Formula One news is not just the headline itself, it's the mindset behind it. Max Verstappen turning up at the Nürburgring, talking about thousands of laps in the simulator, and then stepping into the real thing, like it's just another day at the office, tells you everything you need to know about why this guy is such a problem for everybody else. That is not casual preparation. That is not, let's see how it goes and hope for the best. That's championship-level obsession. And honestly, that's the same reason he's been a headache for the rest of the grid for years. The details matter. The tiny edges matter. The stuff most people ignore is exactly where Verstappen lives. And that's what makes this so fascinating. He's saying the sim was the starting point, that he racked up thousands of laps just to understand the circuit, the curbs, the grip, the rhythm, all of it. That might sound normal on the surface, but it's really not. Plenty of drivers do simulator work. Plenty of drivers talk about preparation. The difference is that Verstappen doesn't treat it like homework. He treats it like a weapon. He shows up with confidence because he's already done the mental miles before the physical ones even begin. That's the sort of approach that separates a driver who looks fast from a driver who actually controls the room. And if you've watched Formula One long enough, you already know that this is the same kind of ruthless edge the greats have always chased. Hamilton has built a career on preparation, on understanding the fine print, on squeezing performance from places other people don't even think to look. That's why this Verstappen story matters beyond just one weekend at one track. It reminds you that the top of Formula One is never really about raw speed alone. It's about how prepared you are when nobody's watching. It's about whether you can walk into a new challenge and already feel like you've been there before. That's also why this Nürburgring story lands so well in the middle of everything else going on. Because while some people are focused on sponsors, some are worried about regulations, and some are already playing the political game for the next era, Verstappen is out there doing what elite drivers do, making the difficult look normal. And when a driver like that gets comfortable at a place as brutal as the Nürburgring, you pay attention. Not because it guarantees a win, but because it tells you how high the standard is. If the benchmark is Verstappen doing thousands of sim laps just to feel ready, then everybody else is already playing catch-up. So here's the real question. When you look at this kind of preparation, do you see it as the future of Formula One? Or do you think the human side still matters more than all the sim work and data combined? And more importantly, if Verstappen sets that standard, who in the paddock is actually built to match it? One of the biggest things happening in Formula One news right now is something the FIA probably never wants to admit publicly. The next generation of regulations may already need fixing before they've even properly arrived. And once you start looking at the V8 conversations, the Honda situation, the Alpine ownership drama, and Mercedes quietly positioning itself for the future, you realize this isn't random noise anymore. This is the sport trying to correct itself in real time. The V8 discussion alone tells you how uncomfortable people inside Formula One have become with the current direction. For years, the sport pushed this image of ultra-complex hybrid technology as the future. Smarter engines, more electrical systems, heavier energy recovery, more sophistication everywhere you looked. On paper, it sounded brilliant. In practice, the cars became massive, heavy, complicated, expensive, and honestly, sometimes disconnected from what fans actually love about Formula One in the first place. Now suddenly, there's growing momentum around the idea of bringing back something closer to a V8 format. Maybe turbocharged, maybe with a smaller electrical component attached, but fundamentally simpler, lighter, louder, and easier to manage. And the weight conversation is massive here. The reports suggesting the cars could lose around 55 kilograms with a more straightforward engine setup are not small details. That changes everything. Cornering feel changes, tire behavior changes, racing quality changes, driver confidence changes. You'd suddenly have cars that feel alive again instead of giant missiles trying to cheat physics every lap. And honestly, this is where a lot of fans will quietly agree with something that sounded crazy a few years ago. Formula One may have over-engineered itself. Because once the FIA starts talking about cars being too draggy, too energy sensitive, too dependent on battery recovery, you can tell the engineers push the concept further than expected. That's what engineers do. Give them a rulebook and they'll find the loopholes, the efficiencies, the gray zones. Ferrari are doing it. Mercedes are doing it. Red Bull definitely do it. The teams don't care whether the rules become awkward later. They care about lap time. And speaking of awkward situations, the Honda story might be the most revealing political moment in the entire paddock right now. Because what's happening there is basically the Formula One equivalent of rivals helping an opponent stay alive just enough to keep the league healthy. Think about that for a second. The other manufacturers are agreeing to special flexibility because Honda are reportedly so far behind that there's concern they could just lose interest and walk away entirely. That's incredible when you really think about it. This is a competitive championship. Mercedes do not wake up wanting Honda to become stronger. Ferrari do not sit in meetings dreaming about Aston Martin suddenly becoming dominant. That's not how elite sport works. But they also understand something bigger. A weak manufacturer leaving the sport entirely hurts everybody financially and politically. So they're trying to keep Honda interested without accidentally giving them enough freedom to suddenly leapfrog the field. That balancing act is classic Formula One politics. Help them, but not too much. Save them, but don't empower them. And if you're Honda, that's gotta sting a little bit. Because everybody can see what's happening. Nobody's doing this out of kindness. They're doing it because a stable Formula One ecosystem benefits everyone. Now tie that into Alpine, because this is where the chessboard starts getting really interesting. Reports about FIA technical figures moving toward Alpine matter more than people think. Fans sometimes underestimate how valuable regulatory knowledge becomes in Formula One. If you understand what the FIA worries about, what they monitor closely, and where they suspect loopholes exist, you already have any advantage before the car even hits the track. And then you add the ownership angle. Mercedes reportedly becoming favorites for Alpine's 24% stake is not just business news, it's strategic positioning. Toto Wolff understands something Helmut Marko and Red Bull figured out years ago. Having a secondary structure matters. It matters for driver development. It matters for political leverage. It matters for influence across the grid. Because look at Verstappen. There's a real argument that without Toro Rosso back in the day, Mercedes might have landed him. Red Bull had a pipeline ready immediately. They could offer a direct Formula One path right away. Mercedes couldn't. And Toto Wolff knows that kind of opportunity cannot happen again. That's why this Alpine situation is so fascinating. On the surface, it's about investment. Underneath, it's about power, influence, control, long-term positioning for the next generation of drivers and regulations. And the funny thing is, everybody complains about Red Bull's two-team structure until they realize how useful it actually is. Even Zak Brown has criticized it publicly, but deep down, every major team principal understands the advantage. Because in modern Formula One, you're not just competing on Sundays anymore. You're competing in engineering offices, ownership meetings, regulatory discussions, junior academies, and political alliances all at the same time. So let me throw this one to you. If Formula One really does move back toward lighter V8-style engines, do you think that helps drivers like Hamilton extend their careers? Or does it make the sport even more dangerous for younger teams trying to catch Verstappen and Red Bull-style operations? And if Mercedes get deeper influence inside Alpine, are we basically watching the beginning of Formula One's next political super team? Ferrari might finally be admitting something that fans have been screaming about for years. Being too safe can actually make you slower than being wrong. And, honestly, Fred Vasseur's comments may be the clearest window we've had yet into why Ferrari kept falling short in modern Formula One news headlines despite having speed, talent, money, and massive expectations sitting on their shoulders every single season. Because according to Vasseur, when he arrived at Ferrari, the culture inside the team was built around avoiding exposure instead of maximizing performance. That's a huge statement, and if you read between the lines, it explains a lot about why Ferrari spent so many years looking close to greatness without fully grabbing it. He talked about adding extra weight just to be safe, adding more fuel than necessary because the team feared running out, opening cooling more than needed because nobody wanted reliability scares, tiny margins everywhere, tiny protections everywhere. And individually, none of those choices sound dramatic. But collectively, Vasseur says it cost Ferrari around 0.2 of a second per lap. 0.2? In that modern Formula One, that's enormous. That's the difference between starting on pole and sitting third row. That's the difference between pressuring Verstappen and watching him disappear into the distance after lap 12. Over an entire season, that's championship-defining pace left on the table simply because the organization became psychologically conservative. And that's where this story gets really interesting, because Ferrari are now trying to rewire that mentality completely. Vasseur's message is basically this: stop protecting yourselves from failure and start chasing performance aggressively. Push the limits, explore the gray zones, maximize everything. If something fails occasionally, so be it. The stopwatch is the only KPI that matters. That line right there might define Ferrari's entire new era. Because if you think about the teams dominating Formula One historically, none of them became great by playing comfortably inside the lines. Red Bull didn't dominate by being cautious. Mercedes during the Hamilton era didn't build an empire by accepting safe compromises everywhere. Those teams hunted marginal gains relentlessly, even if it meant sometimes getting burned. And Ferrari finally seemed willing to embrace that philosophy properly. Now here's where the danger enters the story, because Ferrari's aggressive new aerodynamic concept, especially at the rear of the car, may also be exactly what the FIA targets next. Their entire blown diffuser and airflow philosophy appears to have unlocked serious performance gains. We're talking potentially several tenths per lap according to paddock estimates. That's not a small upgrade. That's the kind of innovation that changes competitive order. The issue is that Formula One's current regulations are already struggling under their own complexity. The cars are producing more drag than expected. They're consuming more energy through corners. Battery deployment is becoming more difficult to manage. And according to reports, the FIA increasingly believes the teams, especially Ferrari, have pushed the aerodynamic concepts further than originally intended, which means Ferrari may become victims of their own success. Because if the FIA clamps down on these concepts next season, Ferrari probably lose more than anybody else. Other teams are copying parts of the philosophy already, sure, but Ferrari built their entire package around it. Their gearbox layout, diffuser structure, airflow management, everything was designed to maximize this approach. Take that away, and suddenly the whole concept becomes vulnerable. And this is the classic Ferrari dilemma, isn't it? Every time they get close, Formula One changes around them. Sometimes it's their own mistakes, sometimes it's reliability, sometimes it's politics, sometimes it's the FIA stepping in because the engineers became too clever. But once again, Ferrari are standing at that dangerous edge between innovation and punishment. Still, there's something refreshing about Vasseur's attitude here. He's basically saying Ferrari would rather occasionally suffer a disqualification, a reliability issue, or a failed gamble than spend another decade losing safely. That's a completely different mentality from the Ferrari fans have grown used to watching. And honestly, he may be right. Because what's the alternative? Finish comfortably third forever? Protect reliability but sacrifice outright pace every weekend? Formula One does not reward fear, especially not against drivers like Verstappen. If you're trying to beat someone operating at that level, You cannot arrive at the track already compromising yourself before the lights even go out. That's why this next stretch of the season matters so much. Montreal could reveal whether Ferrari's new philosophy is truly producing gains, or whether they're walking into another painful cycle of near misses and regulatory headaches. Either way though, something fundamental has changed inside that team. You can hear it in the way Vasseur talks. Ferrari are no longer trying to avoid embarrassment. They're trying to maximize performance first and deal with consequences later. And in Formula One, that mindset can either create champions or spectacular disasters. So now I want your take. Would you rather support a Ferrari team that risks everything for outright pace, even if it occasionally backfires? Or do you think the smarter path is still consistency and caution over an entire season? And more importantly, if the FIA really bans part of Ferrari's concept next year, does that completely reset the fight at the front again? If you enjoyed this fast news F1 breakdown, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest Formula One news, Ferrari updates, Hamilton developments, Verstappen stories, and everything happening across the paddock. Like the video, share it with another F1 fan, and help us push toward that goal of 3,000 subscribers. The support genuinely makes a huge difference for the channel, and there's a lot more big coverage coming very soon. Now tell me honestly, are Ferrari finally becoming dangerous again? Or is this just another chapter in the same old story?